Hi, everyone. This is Karen Smiley. Welcome to 6Ps and AI Pods. This post is part of our AI 6P interview series on AI, software, and wetware. Our guests share their experiences with using AI and how they feel about AI using their data and content. I'm delighted to welcome Josh Geisler from Los Angeles as my guest today on AI, software, and wetware. Josh, thank you so much for joining me on this interview. Please tell us about yourself, who you are, and what you do.
All right. Well, first of all, thank you for having me. It's great to be here. My name is Josh Geisler. I'm a musician and a software developer. I've had a long career in the music industry. My primary instrument is the Bansuri flute, which is a bamboo flute from North India. And after graduating from Berklee College of Music, I made a number of trips to India to study with a great flute master in India named Pandit Raghunath Seth, and is highly devoted to North Indian classical music, amongst other things. In my career, I had a period as a freelancer before I was hired to perform with Cirque du Soleil, and I did a 9-year world tour with them, eventually becoming the band leader of the show Totem, and did 2,650 shows in 45 cities around the world with them. I'm also a software developer, and I am currently developing a streaming platform for ambient and meditative styles of music, which is called AOSON, which I believe is quite innovative in that we have a strict no AI policy and it's a curated app. So there's quite a few differences from what's available out there right now, and I'm sure we'll get into all of that today.
Thank you for that overview. I'm curious, what does EOSON stand for? Is it an acronym?
Eos is Greek for dawn, and son is the root of the sound. Yeah.
Ah, nice.
And it's a
Uh,
very compact name, and it's just 5 letters.
Very cool. One thing that intrigued me about your profile when I came across it was that you have this no AI policy. I had done some investigations into different AI music tools and how they were using generative AI, and the small handful that were ethically trained or that did not use AI. So I'm really curious to hear more about what you're doing with that.
First of all, what's music? I think there's a lot of different opinions on this question. If your primary relationship to music is as digital bits of information, it's one thing. But I feel personally that music is an internal experience that we express outwardly through sound. And that this is a core feature of being human to gather together in community with music. And this is something that's gone back for tens of thousands of years. And I feel like this is something that AI can't really do anything to help. I mean, my ability to tune into my consciousness, I don't see how AI can do that. It can replicate the output of someone going through that process. But I strongly believe that there is a spiritual connection that gets made. And I don't think that you can replicate that with machine learning models. Now, with ASON, we are curating the app. We're going through my network that I've gathered over a 30-year career in music, and I'm bringing on the best people I know for the style of music that we're putting on the app. And I feel like this concept of doing some kind of technical AI detection is going to be an eternal cat and mouse game, right? It's a never-ending cat and mouse game that I honestly have no interest in engaging in. And that's why we're working through the network. I'm going with people that I know, and old is new. I strongly believe that the answer to all of this is that old is new. And how I mean that is that the current platforms all aim to operate at scale. They want to have all the songs that ever were recorded and sell it all for a low monthly price. What you're seeing now, the statistics that are coming out, according to Deezer, I think the latest one I heard was that 35% of the tracks that are being uploaded every day are one-shot AI generated tracks. That's more than a third. And you can see where this is going. If anyone can get on a generative AI platform and they can prompt an album in a day and upload it to the streaming services, where does that leave musicians who take time and care and gear and budget, and it takes time to write and record and mix? If someone can just prompt an album in a day, where is this going? We can see it. It's obvious that it's starting to be, and it will continue to get worse, a flood of AI generated content, which is wholly derivative of what came before it, regardless of the ethics of how the model was trained. It can only replicate what's in its training data, and it can't ever push the art forward. All it can do is mimic what came before. And so where does that leave our human? The royalty pool is already horrifically small. And now it's being diluted even more by this derivative AI content, which doesn't really add anything to the culture. It's just a play by people to try to siphon off some royalty money from the system. It's parasitic. I see it that way. And so I feel like the answer to this isn't some kind of technological cat and mouse game to do AI detection and then, oh, there's some watermark, so I just recorded it to analog tape and then recorded it back into my thing. This is going to be a nonstop thing that I have no interest in. So I think the answer, instead of trying to operate at scale, where we say we're going to have all the things in one place, how about we have a human curated selection of music that fits a certain niche. And this way, yes, there's a bit of an honor system going on. I'm not scanning every upload here, but I know the people and I know how they work and I know what they do. And this is what I see as a response to the commodification of music. People expect music to be a utility that they can turn on like electricity or water and just have an infinite fountain of music coming through. And I strongly believe that I could go on a lot. How much time do we have here? There's so many angles to this.
Well, we've got 10 standard questions and you've covered some of them. We may end up jumping around a little bit, which is totally fine. But I do want to switch back to something else that you said. You also are a software developer. So I don't know if you're writing software for your company, for your
Yes.
product. I'd like to hear a little bit about your perspective from that side and looking at AI coding assistants out there and what your thoughts and experiences are. Have you used AI or machine learning in your software development roles?
That's the irony, that I am using Claude Code to build an app where there's no AI music. And I love it. Honestly, it's great. It's not perfect. It makes tons of mistakes. Some of them are even laughable, but I still believe that even with all the procedures and safeguards you need to have in place to effectively use this tool, it's still a net positive in terms of productivity and ability. So, for example, prior to using Claude Code, I was mostly a front-end developer. And I've had to use a lot of SQL in this project. And having Claude Code assist me with that has been enormously beneficial. I've learned so much about SQL and back-end languages, and I would have gotten there, I could have figured it out, but I got there so much faster with AI. And I think that's what's fascinating about this. I feel like the fact that there's a tremendous amount of open source code, it's not the same ethical problem that you find with music AI companies that are just vacuuming up everything that's publicly available on the internet, copyright or no. There's a lot of code that was fully intended to be shared. So I don't have the same feelings about it in that way. but I feel like it can be an enormous assist to someone like myself who has a knowledge of another industry and the ability to code without AI. This gives me a superpower ability to produce something on my own that would have taken teams of people and a large amount of money to do, which enables many things. One of which is there's no need to raise venture capital and all that comes with that. Venture capital is going to get involved in something if they think they can 10x, 50x, 100x their money. And with that comes a certain amount of pressure to disrupt an industry or something like that. And thus, this problem of scale, where now the investors expect enormous returns, and so they want everything to be as big as possible because the fundamental driving force behind it is greed. It's the desire to accumulate as much as possible from their investment. And that's the way of the world. I don't begrudge them that. I just don't want to participate in it. By having this ability to produce without that, enabled by Cloud Code, now I don't need to operate at that kind of scale. I can have 100 artists and 10,000 subscribers, and it's cool. It makes money. Everyone's happy. It doesn't need to scale to millions of people because you don't have the same cost structure as you did before. Okay, we get some investment money. What comes with that? Now we hire a bunch of people. Now the product manager has to justify their salaries, so they just keep coming up with features. Hey, how about we add this thing to it? Because I have to do something because I'm getting this paycheck. And now the developer's like, oh, yeah, that's a 5-point ticket. The whole agile thing is ridiculous. It's so funny how things get added to software just because people justify their salary. And you ask a developer, oh, how much work will that take? Make sure it's a Fibonacci number. It's like, oh, yeah, that'll be a 3-pointer to change the button to red or whatever. It's so silly, the whole thing. And it's based in that. People have to justify their salary.
What you're describing is really agile theater. It's not the heart or the principles behind agile, and it's evolved in some unproductive ways. I won't go there.
Yeah,
That's a big rant for
that's a
me.
whole other. I'd love to hear it actually, because I'm just describing what I've seen. And, with regards to something like a music player app, there's no revolutionary technological breakthrough behind it. It's a music app. It plays music. How many features does it really need to have? Music app tech. It's not a thing. You know what it is. You open it, you find the music, and it plays it, and there you go. It doesn't really need to be any more complicated than that. Remember when the iPod came out? How amazing that was? There was no algorithm. You just found the thing you wanted to listen to, and you were fully capable of pushing the button 5 times instead of 2 times. It was fine. And before that, you had to actually use a cassette Walkman. I'm old enough to have used those, or rewinding tapes. People are pretty capable of manipulating their fingers to tap a button on a screen. You don't have to make it that easy for them. Anyway, point is, I feel like Cloud Code, for someone like me who's doing something like this, it's a huge advantage over what was possible before. And as far as the industry-wide ramifications, I think that's a different story. I think it is true. You can do more with less. I have a friend who has a startup, and their velocity has increased exponentially since I hipped their product manager to Cloud Code. Now their whole team is adding features, and they're being far more productive than they were prior. And that does mean less jobs. I mean, the job market has changed, and I don't think it'll ever quite be the same. Although I do find it extremely ironic that this is the case. The whole premise of software was to automate things and basically eat other people's lunch with software. Like, hey, there's taxi drivers out there. Let's eat their lunch with software. Hey, there's hotels out there. Let's eat their lunch with software. And now the snake is eating its own tail, and software engineers are like, oh, the software's taking away our jobs. Guess what? That's what you've been doing to everyone else for all these years, Again, it's the way of the world. This is just what I see. And so I feel for someone like me who has this knowledge of another industry, in my case, the music industry, and the ability to code, it's an incredible power up to be able to create something that I feel is very important for the world, which is not only a preservation of the sacred fire of human creativity that I refuse to see go out on my watch, but also the benefits to listeners. We're focused on ambient and meditative styles of music because those things are very much the antidote to this modern condition of short attention spans and dopamine driven algorithmic addiction that we see is rampant in the culture. The best minds of our generation applied their talents to addicting everyone to their devices. And they won. They got us all. They got everyone. They got me. They got you. They got everyone. Because they figured out how to hack everyone's attention. And you can heal from this. And I'm certainly not perfect, but I'm better than I used to be, in part because I just put on music and get on with my life. And this is something that I feel like is really important. We need people to be embodied off the screens. Look at how much suffering has been caused by algorithmic based social media apps. This is a long conversation. And not to mention the political implications of getting everybody riled up about different things and fighting each other. I mean, it's crazy, you know. It's great if I need Google Maps. Awesome. It's super helpful to help me find things while I'm driving. There's lots of great things it's good for, but beyond that, the whole addictive quality of the internet is really a problem. And I strongly feel that music is a big part of the antidote to that. And that's the fundamental humanity that I'm fighting for here. That's what drives me. That's really the core of it. Bringing back the fundamental soulfulness and humanity to our existence that was the norm before everyone got addicted to all these things. I used to like myself better. There was a year when I went to India and I was living in my teacher's house and he didn't have Wi-Fi. All I had was my laptop with no internet. I had a book of Sudoku puzzles that I bought at the train station, and my teacher had a DVD of Kung Fu Panda, which is a great movie, but you can only watch Kung Fu Panda so many times. So I had my book of Sudoku puzzles and a flute and a room, and all I did was practice all day long. And I made so much progress. And the next year, he asked me to bring a Wi-Fi router as a gift. So of course I did. I was nowhere near as productive. The times before all that, there was just a different way of being. And I feel that, at least in my own case, I liked myself better. I liked the person I was more without it. And that's the core of why I'm doing what I'm doing. And yeah, if Claude Code can help me bring people more in touch with embodied reality, then it's great. And I'm all for it. Yeah, it's complex feelings about this. Yeah.
Yeah, I understand that. So when you were working as a software developer, did you ever take any courses in AI? Have you ever studied the mechanics, what's going on under the hood, or looking at
No.
it mainly from the application side?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I'm not a
Okay.
machine learning engineer.
I'm wondering if you can share a specific story with our audience on times that you've used AI and machine learning features, maybe ones of when it worked well and one when it doesn't work well. You mentioned with software that it could make some laughable mistakes. So if there's a laughable mistake that comes to mind, if you could share that, but also share a time when it has done something specific that really helped you to speed up, maybe in front-end development.
Yeah, the back-end logic, writing complex SQL functions for calculating the artist royalties for the platform had very specific requirements. And it just knocked it out by defining the requirements very specifically, what it needed to be, and it just worked. It was incredible. That would have taken me a long time to figure out. Another one for front end development, I was building the admin portal. I get a notification when someone uploads a new album, and then I can go have a listen to it because it's curated, right? So I wanted to put a audio player on the screen. I prompted that and it just knocked it out perfectly. One shot. It took 30 seconds. That's something that would have taken a few hours to code. So 30 seconds versus 3 hours. It's hard to argue with that. In terms of laughable errors, besides the obvious, like something doesn't work and you're like, oh, I'm getting this error. And it's like, oh, the answer is this. And you put that in and like, oh, now I'm getting this error. And then it goes back to the first solution. You're like, no, that's the first thing. And, oh, you're absolutely right. And then it goes right back to the second. And you're just like, ah, what are you doing? You know, it can be laughable because it's like, do you remember 1 second ago what you just said? More than that, I think doesn't see the big picture and how to organize data flows in the right way. A lot of times it'll embed complex logic at the UI component level. The logic should live at a higher level than that. And then that can cause all kinds of problems.
So the
If you're
architectural
not,
layering and separation is not something that's doing well.
I feel that way, yes. I feel that it doesn't look at the big picture and think about what's the optimal place to put certain types of logic. And if you're not careful, then it can cause a lot of problems later on. And also, if you're debugging something, it can come up with incorrect solutions to the debug or something that solves the immediate issue but causes some other problem. And if you don't undo those wrong solutions, then that leads to other bugs that then you have to spend time untangling. And then when you realize, oh, it's because of that thing, I knew when I was debugging that, but now the first thing's back. So you really have to spend the time to read through what it's doing and think critically about it before committing. And I think a big help for this is to have very clearly defined specifications for what you're doing and to use your ability to think structurally and then guide the AI to put together small pieces that fit together according to your larger design.
Yeah, so those are some stories of how you've been using it. You obviously are avoiding use of AI for generating music. Are there any other things that you avoid using AI-based tools for? Writing messages, generating images, anything like that?
I have used AI to generate images. Like when Stable Diffusion first started becoming popular, I think in what was that, about 21 or 22, just before ChatGPT came out. I remember I got way into Stable Diffusion. That was shocking when it first came out. But then after some time, I stopped just straight up generating AI images. I do use Photoshop and some of the AI features for removing things from the background or something like that. I think it's amazing for that. But I don't use it to write unless I'm emotional and I need to make sure the tone is measured and appropriate. That I find it is really good for if something is getting you stressed, a difficult situation, and you want to make sure that your reply meets a certain standard of, nonviolent communication, then I think it's great for that. It's super great for that. But I don't write any social media posts using it. I want it to be all in my own voice because everyone can smell it at this point. It's not this, it's that. But here's the uncomfortable truth, blah, 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 blah. We hear all those things over and over again. M dashes is an obvious one, too. I feel like if you use AI to generate your stuff without thought, then you're basically saying to the world, this isn't important enough for me to spend time thinking about. And I feel like if I'm taking the time to speak to the world and I'm trying to make a certain point, I want to make sure that's coming from me, not just the amalgamation of the averaging out of everything that's ever been written on the internet.
Yeah, makes sense. The whole idea that we need to keep our brains engaged if we use it as a tool. A lot of people will insist on writing their first draft, but then they'll say, okay, here's what I wrote, poke holes in it, tell me what I'm doing wrong. Then they fix it themselves. So they're using it more like a reviewer or an editor telling them how to make the writing better, but not writing it for them. Other people use it just to do a brain dump and then come back and say, here, organize my thoughts for me and help me get some structure on them. And that's almost an accessibility or enablement use. So there are some good uses of it, but like you're saying, mindless, generate 20 notes for me that I can post in the next week. That doesn't
Yeah,
really add
yeah,
any value to the world, you know?
yeah, exactly. Those are actually good points. That accessibility angle is an interesting way to think about it.
Or even for people that are writing in a language that's not their native language. You know,
Yeah,
their thoughts are worth hearing and communicating, and the world needs to hear them, but the language barrier can be an issue. It's hard to look at those uses and say those are bad. I think when people say they don't like AI writing, it's because of a lot of people using it without their wetware engaged
yeah.
and just spitting something out to post something or to post comments. A lot of people are saying, like you said, we can smell the AI comments a mile away, just the pattern, and they could have written that comment on any of thousands of posts and it's not relevant. And I think when people say they don't like AI, a lot of it comes to that. It's slop, but not all things that are AI assisted are slop. And that's where I think the distinctions
Agree.
come in.
I agree. And
So,
the more time goes on, the less I am interested in saying what other people are doing is right or wrong or ethical and unethical. I'm not here to judge. I
mhm.
think it's up to each person to think critically about how they want to relate to this technology. We all
You,
have our own credo,
mhm. Yeah, you mentioned with the coding tools that you feel comfortable with that use of it because a lot of it was written for open source. I mean, some of it's under licenses that have restrictions, and I don't know that the scrapers respect that, but in general, at least, the idea is that it's more open, so you feel comfortable with the sourcing. There is a lot of concern and discussion about where these AI tools get the content or the works that they train on. And they use data that people put into systems. LinkedIn has done this to us. Things that we wrote 10 or 20 years ago, they're saying now, well, this is fair game for us to use for training our tools. And a lot of concerns about that. And some other countries have better protection than we do
know.
for allowing us to opt out. There's a concept called the three C's: consent, credit, and compensation that creative people are entitled to for use of their works. It sounds like you have some opinions on different sides of that. In general, what are your thoughts about cases where, for instance, they've scraped videos or images, pictures, things like that? Do you feel like if it's in the service of the greater good and everybody can benefit from it, that it's not ideal, but it's okay?
Yeah, I don't know that there's any one-shot answer to this question. I mean, you can look at, for example, in music, if I hear a song and I like the chord progression of that song, I can just make another song with that chord progression because you can't copyright a chord progression, Otherwise there would be no music because those are just the fundamental building blocks of music. But if I take the master recording of that chord progression and I use it in my own work, then the law is clear. You used their intellectual property to create your own, and there does need to be compensation for that. And you could look at Gen AI as a next generation version of sampling, where you need inputs to create those outputs. So, yeah, I feel that there must be some form, especially in the creative fields where it's intellectual property that's copyrighted, that's being ingested by the models. There has to be consent and compensation. Let's say something like coding. What's the analog of a chord regression? Well, certain things are just boilerplate code, right? So if I'm doing an API call
Mhm.
and putting some data on the screen, it's pretty standard stuff, So it's hard to say that it's a direct analog. I think that sometimes things are good for some people and bad for other people, and it depends who you ask. Was Napster good? Well, if you liked getting all the music you wanted for free, it was great. If you just don't care, then yeah, it's amazing. But if you're the one who is having your work stolen from you, then it's not so great. At the time, I remember Lars Ulrich was very outspoken about it, the drummer of Metallica, and he was pilloried for being outspoken and saying, "This is theft. You can't just take everyone's music. This is our livelihood here." And people were like, music wants to be free. You're just going to sell more concert tickets. I'm not an ethicist. I'm sure there's people who have thought deeper than I have on these questions. And again, the more time goes forward, the less I am inclined to say what other people should or shouldn't do, or how people should or shouldn't relate to it. And I just speak for myself and I do what feels right for me. I mean, I'm not breaking any laws that I'm aware of. And I think it's a difficult thing. The regulatory aspect has to catch up to the technology. And there is a bit of a Wild West thing going on right now. And we'll see how it shakes out. Suno and Udio are making deals with the major labels now for licensing. And what does that world look like where now they can make the same product but license on all the major label recordings? And they can say,
Mhm.
well, we got licenses and all the royalties are being paid. And now,
Mhm.
what world is that?
Yeah, one thing I haven't heard about with the settlements is the royalties are going back to the big music companies, but are they actually redistributing those royalties to the artists who made them? I know I've heard with in the book world that's book publishers are licensing their whole catalogs to these companies. But writers that I've talked to said, hey, I'm not getting any of that. So there's a fairness question there. And obviously, anyone who's not listed with a major publisher or a self-publisher isn't going to be covered by those kinds of agreements.
Yeah,
So it's a partial solution, maybe, but it's certainly not a holistic solution.
right. Suno scraped up everything on YouTube and then they go and make a deal with a major label. Well, does that cover all the YouTube creators? They can say, oh, we're
Mm.
ethically licensed. But yeah, there's definitely an attitude of move fast and break things and settle in court later.
Yeah, where the court
It's,
costs are just the cost of business that they put in the other column.
yeah, yeah. That's,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, they just rather fight it out in court and settle. And then, yeah,
Mhm.
this is the world we live in.
So with the AI tools that you use, for instance, Claude Code, do you feel like they've been transparent with you about where they got the data that they use for training it?
I am not sure where they got the data for training it. Yeah.
It's not something they put in front of you when you start your account with them, certainly.
No, it's just like, yeah, write code fast, pay $20.
So as consumers and members of the public, our personal data and content is getting used by different AI-based tools and systems. Do you know of any cases that you could share, obviously without disclosing any personal information, but where your information has been used by these systems? You mentioned you travel a lot, so TSA certainly uses some of our data. You mentioned social media. Obviously, they are doing things with our data that we may or may not like.
I'm not specifically aware of any time that my data has been used. I haven't found any deep fake images of myself or anything like that, or any uploads to my artist account on Spotify. I don't know if you know about this, but that's a big problem that's happening now. People can just say they're another artist when they get their DistroKid account. There's no verification, and they can
Oh,
just
wow.
make an AI track and put it on someone else's profile. In fact, I went to listen to a certain artist who's it's amazing with analog synthesizers. Really, it's really beautiful, atmospheric music. He's an incredible artist. And then I went on Apple Music, and the most recent release was like a solo piano thing. And I was just like, what is this? It felt to me like an AI generated thing that someone just uploaded in their name to scrape off royalties from that artist's recognition. And that's an acknowledged problem that's happening. And there's no easy answers, and there's no
Ah,
identity verification for this. So this is a big problem that's
but if that
happening.
artist has their own profile, why would they even allow somebody else to upload things
Not how it
and attach?
works. The distributors, you can just get a DistroKid account, and it's
Oh,
like, what's your artist name? And it's like, oh, we found this artist on Spotify. Is that you? And you're just like, yup. And they're like, do
oh,
you
jeez.
pinky swear? And you're like,
Oh, jeez.
yup. And that's it.
Oh, I hadn't heard about that. I heard about the streaming volume that especially Spotify was not doing a
Yeah.
good job of handling, but I didn't know people were actually allowed to basically impersonate an
Yeah.
artist. That's not cool at all.
Not cool at all.
Wow. Oh, yeah. I heard about some of the things late last year that Spotify was doing. I said, you know what? I'm going to disconnect my podcast from
Yep.
Spotify. I don't want to have that connection with them. It's probably not just them, but they're at least the ones that I heard of. And I'm sure they don't miss me, but I feel better about it.
Yeah, I mean, taking all of the money from the music industry and instead of giving it back to artists, using it to invest in AI military kill bots or whatever, that's just crazy. What timeline are we living in where that's the case? It's insane. It just boggles the mind. Could you think of anything worse to take money away from musicians and then give it to that? It's shocking, really.
Yeah. Do you know of any times when any music that you've created has been scraped or stolen or misused? I know you mentioned not your personal pictures, but has your music ever been stolen?
Would imagine so, but I don't have any direct way to know.
Hmm. Have you ever had to deal with a use of your data, like data being sold to a data broker and getting phishing or spam or scam attempts or anything like that?
Scammers contact me all the time. I usually just hang up on them. So who knows? I mean, it's out there, you know. There's only so much you can do.
Yeah, there's been some distrust building with these companies and what they do with their data. And I think to some extent that's healthy because we
Yeah.
need to not assume that they're going to collect our birth date and only use it for knowing if we're old enough to watch something versus selling it to somebody to
Yeah.
market to us. I'm wondering, is there a company that you do trust? Or if there's one that you don't trust now, what would it take for you to say, okay, I'm willing to trust them with my data, my music, my work?
I don't trust any of these companies because their fundamental motivation is greed. That's the driving factor behind everything, the desire to maximize profits. And that's what they do. I mean, think about all the people that have used ChatGPT for mental health and what it knows about people. Do you trust Sam Altman with that information? The ultimate Silicon Valley insider? Like, I don't.
Yeah, I was just reading an article on Substack yesterday warning people about what they think is this private or incognito mode in a chatbot is not as private as they might think it is or assume it is. And basically telling people if you do this in Gemini, here's what really happens when you choose that mode, and here's what happens in ChatGPT, and trying to just raise some awareness around that. But yeah, the other thing that I saw in that article, which I liked, was the idea that you shouldn't put anything into a chatbot that you wouldn't be comfortable having on a billboard.
Wow. Yeah.
So basically the internet test, but now adapted for AI.
Yeah. I think sadly, by the time we catch up and realize what is actually being done, it'll in many ways be too late. Yeah. There was, I believe, a debate in the UK over training data for generative AI in the UK. And there was someone whose position was that data wants to be free and you can opt out. Okay, but is it going to be the responsibility of every individual person to regularly check who's training AI models and with what? And it should be their responsibility to
Mhm.
affirmatively opt out of something? That just seems fundamentally backwards, but that's the position that's being pushed. And there's been a lot of regulatory capture, and a lot of politicians are just playing ball with the industry. I think there's a lot of ignorance around what the technology actually is. There was some aging senator on a panel who was like, the internet's a series of tubes. Do you remember that video? He was just so out of touch. He had no idea how to relate to the internet. And I think that's something that's going on, even just to call it artificial intelligence, it's not really intelligent. It doesn't know what it's saying to you. It's not intelligent.
Mhm.
But the myth that scaling is the answer to AGI is just false.
Or even that LLMs are the path to getting to AGI. Gary Marcus always says neurosymbolic AI is a better path to that. I see this come up a lot. The old Jeff Goldblum line from Jurassic Park. We're so focused on what you could do that you didn't stop to think whether you should do it. I think a lot of people are waking up to the fact that we need to be asking more. Yes, but should we? And is this the right way? Even just the fact that they're so focused on throwing hardware at it and, let's buy billions more of these special chips. Whereas the countries that don't have the supplies of those chips are saying, no, let's focus on making more efficient algorithms that are less likely to consume the world's water and resources and everything else. There are other ways to do things. Stepping back and thinking about the big picture of the world is missing in a lot of places, and it's the greed motivation. I find it so interesting that with Eson, you're stepping away from that and saying, no, I don't need to make $1 billion. I'm just doing something that adds value to the world, and it's something that's manageable and fits your life. And I think that's pretty awesome.
Yeah. What am I going to do with $1 billion? Like, I don't desire that. What am I supposed to do? What do I need? I'm a very simple man. I like to get up, I like to have some coffee, play some music, write some code, hang out with my loved ones, go to nature, go scuba dive. I mean, none of this requires $1 billion. I'm a happy guy. I like to play music. What do I need $1 billion for? You know?
Mhm.
My goal is to make the most artist-friendly platform in the industry. That is my goal. And I could talk a lot about how I'm doing that, but I feel like if you create the optimal environment for artists to thrive, you create this beautiful garden for them, then it will bloom in its own time. It will grow in time. They're going to bring their people. They're going to bring their people. People know people, and it starts with this beautiful thing and it'll grow through just the natural course of things. Not everything has to happen online. I've been having a lot of phone calls. Just remember that actually just calling people on the phone and just talking to people, people talking to people. I feel like that's never going to change. And technology can enable that. And it's certainly great that anyone can have their voice heard around the world. It's a huge boon, but it doesn't have to be that way. It can just be people talking to people. And I create an environment for artists, and then they say, oh, you should get this person involved. And that person knows that person. And this is the way the world works. And all of those people have fans, they all have listeners. My strategy for artists to say to their people, like, hey, you can either listen to me on Spotify and I'll get 2 cents and you'll be funding killer robots, or you can listen to me here and I get a much better deal and there's no killer robots. And you'll find a curated selection of artists that are like me. I feel like that's great. And my approach to this is very much a rising tide lifts all boats. And yeah, what if the fundamental motivation isn't just resource accumulation maximization? What if it's just to enable musicians who create long form content to thrive? Because the way the current streaming economy works, a 30-second play is this paid the same as a 30-minute play.
Mhm.
And so you see people making these 2 and 3 minute tracks to try to squeeze out whatever payouts they can get out of this broken system. But that's not
Mhm.
really what's best for listeners who are trying to create an atmosphere and maybe go on a deeper journey than a 2 minute track can enable you. Now, there's so many musicians who create long form works, and I've talked to them. I'm talking to many people who are saying, I have all these recordings of my shows, and it's like these long sound journeys of beautiful art that happens, but it's an hour long and I have nowhere to put it because why if it's going to pay the same as a 30-second track? I feel it's so important to create a home for this. And the artists who aren't willing to compromise what they do because some venture capital backed streaming platform has decreed that this is how we calculate payouts. So now get with the program. Why should that be the driver of how artists create? It's insane. And we need spaces that incentivize artists to create in the way that they want to create. So how we're doing that is, first of all, the money a user pays goes to the artist they listen to. That is not true on Spotify. And Spotify or all the other services, your money goes into a big pile and they say, who got the most streams? Okay, they get the most money. And the per stream payout is minuscule, as we all know. So if I pay my subscription and let's say I only listen to that one artist, well, maybe they'll get a few cents, but the rest of my money is going to Taylor Swift or whoever. And that's very different. Where whoever you listen to, they get your money. And it's divided not by number of tracks, but by the amount of time you listen to that artist compared to other artists.
Mhm.
And so therefore, just go on the journey because the longer they listen to you, the more share of their subscription you're going to get. And it doesn't matter how many tracks. What does that have to do with anything? It's calculated in a way that just the incentives are completely wrong. Unless your priorities are to just extract maximum value from artists, in which case it's completely correct.
Right.
But why is that? I'm a musician first. I've been a musician my whole adult life, and I can code. So, what would I like to see it be? I'm building a home for my own music. I don't want to make 3 minute tracks. I play Bonsuri flute. I do meditation, ambient music. Do you think I want to do 2 minute tracks of that? No way. Where's the juice in that? There is none. Creatively, artistically, as I was saying earlier, it's about going on an internal journey and connecting with the divinity inside of us and then making that audible in a form where people can resonate with it. And I don't think I can do that in 2 minutes as a complete experience. It's just impossible. But there needs to be a place where that can be supported. And that's what I'm building. I don't remember what your original question was, but this is what I'm passionate about. This is what drives me.
Just concluding after we talked about the companies that we don't trust and their incentives and being motivated by greed and the fact that you're building something which is very much in the face of that and saying, no, we have a better way to do it, better for the musicians. And I'm guessing better for listeners as well. Who wants to listen to
Good idea.
chopped up little tracks when they're trying to get into a meditative state of mind?
Exactly. That's the problem I have. I use Apple Music. I go on Apple Music to listen to the focus playlist or chill playlist, whatever, and it's terrible. I'm sorry, Apple Music, but 2 minute tracks just don't do it. But that's the norm. So it's going to take someone like me to come and propose a different way. Say, here I stand. And ironically, Cloud Code made it possible for me to do all of this work by myself without a venture capitalist backing me, so that the incentives reinforce my values and what I want to see in the world, which is no AI music. It makes no sense, but it also makes perfect sense. And
Mhm.
again, we all have to come to our own conclusions about what parts of AI, which is such a blunt tool for this conversation, but how we want to
Mhm.
relate to it. I feel like if it can empower someone like me to create something larger than myself that does good for artists and listeners, and hopefully my little contribution to lifting people's spirits and raising their consciousness on the planet at this time, then I think in the end, it's good, or at least it's good for that.
It's definitely a net positive.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think so. Because to do it by myself would take a lot more time than I have.
I want to wish you a lot of luck in getting it off the ground and continuing to grow it. And I really appreciate you making time for the interview. So thank you, Josh.
I enjoyed talking with you too. If anyone wants to check out what we're doing, you can visit eoson.app. That's aoson.app. We are in the beta testing with the artists right now and testing the upload portal, and the users beta will be launching soon. There is an email capture form on the page and a spiel about what we're doing and why it's important. And so you can check it out there. Thank you so much.
About this interview series and newsletter. This post is part of our AI 6P interview series on AI, software, and wetware. It showcases how real people around the world are using their wetware, brains and human intelligence, with AI-based software tools, or are being affected by AI. And we're all being affected by AI nowadays in our daily lives, perhaps more than we realize. For some examples, see post, but I don't use AI. We want to hear from a diverse pool of people worldwide in a variety of roles. If you're interested in being a featured interview guest, anonymous or with credit, please get in touch. 6Ps and AI Pods, AI 6P is a 100% reader-supported publication. All new posts are free to read and listen to. To automatically receive new AI 6P posts and support our work, consider becoming a subscriber. It's free.